Great. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Immersive Technologies in Travel, Training, Simulation and Entertainment webinar hosted by Modena Media and Entertainment. On behalf of Modena, the Boiler Room and the University of the Western Cape, I want to thank you for registering and choosing to spend your valuable time with us this afternoon. We are looking forward to insightful and robust debate and demonstrations on the value and practical applications of augmented reality and virtual reality. Let's first deal with some domestics. Our format will comprise 2 sessions. Each session will have a Q&A section, and we will have some open discussion thereafter at the end and a Q&A session thereafter. If you have questions during the speaker sessions, please put them in the chat box, and we will deal with them during the Q&A sessions. Let's quickly test the chat box. Can we do that? I'd like you guys to put the market segment that you operate in the chat box, please. Be that education, manufacturing, marketing. I see welcome Hermie from higher education. Please pop them into the chat box. We've got civil engineering, we've got marketing, visual effects, more higher education. Thanks, guys. I think, well, let's give you another 20 seconds. Good day, Michael, and welcome. Great. Illustration, animation, mining. Awesome. Guys, it's clear that the chat box is working. It's also a bit of an icebreaker, but you probably got that. Also note that the webinar is being recorded and will be made available to all attendees afterwards. I saw an interesting quote by Scott Adams about virtual reality. It went, "When virtual reality gets cheaper than dating, society is doomed." Well, enough of that. With virtual reality, companies can build an environment and bring it to their users. With augmented reality, they can enhance what is already in our environment and add new layers of interactivity and experience. And that's why many early adopters and innovators are looking to AR and VR as a way of engaging with their potential customers. I recently read that Microsoft has unveiled software tools designed to make it easier and less expensive for people to access AR and VR content. So it's clearly here to stay. I'll say no more about AR and VR, and we'll leave this to you and our esteemed panelists. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our speakers and our panel. Mark is the founder and the current CEO of the Boiler Room in South Africa and Australia. The Boiler Room is a dynamic innovation and consultation hub, delivering learning, digital production, safety and management consulting solutions. Established in 1999 with a focus on animation, the organization has evolved and now specializes in 2D and 3D animation, e-learning, augmented reality, virtual reality, and a few other Industry 4.0 disruptive technologies. Originally from a small country town, Coffs Harbour in New South Wales, he moved to Sydney to obtain a degree in computer programming. He worked in television animation and special effects that led him to the UK. Mark introduced 3D animation to South Africa and lectured at most universities and colleges before starting the Boiler Room. He currently resides in Johannesburg with his wife and 2 children. You'll meet Mark later. Adi Stephens, Chief Learning and Innovation Officer with more than 23 years experience in all aspects of human capital and learning. Adi's success is derived from his ability to develop and manage world-class solutions, utilizing the latest technologies and methodologies. Equipped with an extensive background in human resources and information technology, his skill lies in creating innovative solutions and environments that translate employee behaviors into high-impact outcomes. For learning initiatives to be successful, these outcomes must enhance knowledge retention, be personalized to individual needs, foster collaboration and social learning, offer an experience rather than an event, be totally strategically aligned, fit around the shape of work and allow the individual to learn whenever, wherever, and however. But most importantly, according to Adi, they must be fun and engaging. Originally from Windhoek, Namibia, he currently resides with his wife and daughter on a small holding in Midrand near Johannesburg. Ruchen Wyngaard is a technology enthusiast, someone who enjoys the implementation of technology across several disciplines. He obtained his MCom Information Technology with a focus on virtual reality and human cognition while studying towards a postgraduate diploma in Immersive Technologies. He's also a lecturer at the University of the Western Cape in the Department of Information Systems with a specialization in software development, including mobile and web technologies, as well as immersive technologies. In his undergraduate year, he managed to run a startup e-commerce business of his own for several years after its inception as a project for one of the modules he was enrolled in. He was awarded a certificate for entrepreneurship in 2018 by the university in recognition for this achievement. Ruchen also has a background in managing IT projects, and apart from his commitment to the university, he is the lead technology educator at the Shaw Academy, a privately owned online education organization based in Dublin with an international footprint. Ruchen spends a lot of his time reading as well as exploring the realm of science and technology, and he really enjoys activities that involve the outdoors. Stacey Pearson is the marketing manager at Modena Media and Entertainment and the brains behind this webinar. He's also on this webinar. Please contact Stacey for further information regarding upcoming webinars, webinars on demand, any of your AR and VR needs, or any sales-related matters. At this stage, I'd like to get into the first session from Ruchen, the importance of augmented reality and virtual reality in education and the future, with particular reference to the fourth industrial revolution. I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to you, Ruchen.
Thank you, Mark. Hi, everyone. So as Mark mentioned, my name is Ruchen Wyngaard. I'm a lecturer at the University of Western Cape, which is my primary job. And I'm going to share with you a presentation based on mobile applications or mobile virtual reality applications in the context of nature reserves. Okay, so just let me know if you can actually see my screen once it pops up. Can everyone see?
Yep.
Perfect. So essentially, this was a project that we did in 2019 for the University of Western Cape. And this is essentially just titled An Immersive Mobile Application for Improved Learning and Virtual Tour Experience, a Nature Reserve Perspective. So we were 3 individuals involved in this project, myself, Lebogang and Kamanita, who are currently doing their masters as well in virtual reality, mind you. And essentially what I'm going to talk about here is just how we went about building up this project and what the end results were and what the journey was and what we've learned and all of those things. So in starting, what we'll do is we'll go through an introduction. We'll just have a brief background of how VR and the nature reserve and tourism is sort of blending together currently out there. We'll have a look at the existing literature found in research. We'll then have a look at the rationale and objectives for why this study or this project was undertaken. And then I will have a look at the design and methodology. Sorry, my screen is automatically changing. We'll then have a look at the design and methodology and then conclude things with the limitations. Okay. So introduction. So current technological advancements has disrupted the way certain sectors function. This includes education and tourism. Now, why is this the case? So VR is not new, but it's very disruptive technology in that people or industries are now uptaking the technology, especially in education, because they're starting to realize the power VR and AR has to offer as a teaching and learning tool. So virtual reality mobile applications enable users to engage in knowledge transfer. Now, this is quite important. This is one of the reasons higher education is sort of adopting the technology now, because what they're realizing is that people or knowledge acquisition and retention happen more seamlessly when you actually allow the user to become involved in something like a simulation, for example, right? So VR field tours encourage ecological protection as well. So now, when we're talking about a nature reserve perspective, what we are basically saying here is that by developing systems where the user doesn't have to be present in the physical location, the ecosystem of a nature reserve, for example, you can actually help protect that ecosystem by listening to the traffic or the individuals actually traversing that sort of ecosystem in the nature reserve. Okay. So what does the literature say about virtual reality and education and tourism and all of these things? So most students aren't offered the same opportunity to undertake field trips. Now, this was one key factor in developing the software and other projects as well. The idea here is that if you think about 500 students that have to go on a field trip, and if you think about the expense and the cost involved with that, I mean, it's massive, right? Because we talk about things like meals, transport, all of those kind of things, right? So essentially what VR allows you to do is drive down those costs and actually offer all individuals the same opportunity and make them feel as if they're actually present in these virtual simulations. So lecturers should also think of VR as an active learning tool to enhance the educational experience. Now, yes, we can argue VR is never going to replace the real thing. That's not the point. The point here is that alongside whatever the educational institutions are doing, VR should be there as a supporting tool, okay? Sort of like a crux, if you will. And when resources become scarce, field trips are often targeted for cuts in higher education. Okay, now this leads to the first point again. Because it's so expensive, you can actually use VR to supplement field trips and all of these learning experiences, right? Current higher education has shifted its view of VR as an entertainment tool to an educational device. And this is quite true. We all know that virtual reality is not just an entertainment tool. It's not just there for gaming and for movies. VR is essentially an extremely powerful tool when it comes to training individual in the STEM fields, for example, okay? And this is why higher education has sort of focused on VR as a tool. So there is also a stance that when implementing IT projects that take into context virtual reality or immersive technologies, that there must be project management methodologies aligned accordingly based on industry standards. Because again, VR might not be new, but if you think about it, different kinds of IT projects or software development projects require different methodologies and IT project management techniques moving forward, okay? So in developing these kinds of software, it's important for higher education institutions to understand which methodologies to adopt. Now, what are some of the rationale and objectives? So the university basically was seeking innovative ways to assist the under-resourced nature reserve and to digitize the tour, because they only had something like 3 individuals that were providing the tour for students and so on. And the idea here was that we had to digitize the tour so that more people would have access to the nature reserve. There was also a need to improve accessibility to the nature reserve using immersive technology, of course, and then also to educate users about the ecosystem of the nature reserve, especially for those that don't have access to it. And then lastly, the same point made previously, to promote ecological protection by providing a remote learning experience for students. And not just students, it could basically be anyone within the community, for example. Okay. So in terms of the design and methodology, what did we do? How did we follow through with this? And how did we implement this as a project as well as research? So essentially, we had to gather the requirements from our stakeholder, which was sort of the senior officer of the nature reserve. And she informed us of what the nature reserve does, what the processes are, what she requires in terms of the system to do. And then we had to map that out into a VR mobile application. In terms of producing the IT artifact, and the IT artifact here being the actual in solution, some of the tools we used was the Eon engine, which was not a very great engine. It's not widely known either. Was quite buggy, but we had to make do with what we had. We didn't opt for Unity or for Unreal at the time because of the partnership that Eon had formed with the university. But moving forward, they are now actually developing the software using Unity as well as 3ds and so on. Okay. The tools we used to model our 3D objects was 3ds Max and Blender. In the event that we couldn't model these complex specimens, plants, animals, spiders, bugs, you name it, we would then have to we would actually have to move over to repositories like Sketchfab, retrieve those 3D objects and remodel them if need be. We also use Adobe Suite, for example, for our texturing and so on. And then interestingly enough, we use photogrammetry. And what is photogrammetry? Photogrammetry is essentially this thing where you take anywhere between 200, 300 shots of an object, and you essentially stitch that object using software. So what we had done was, because we couldn't, for example, model a caracal, which is a cat or a grijsbokkie, what we had to do was we had to take a stuffed animal, take several pictures of that stuffed animal, and then use Measurum, which is a photogrammetry software. And the software is so intelligent that it can actually take all these angles and stitch it together and give you a object. And I'll show you an example in a second. In terms of the methodology for the project, we opted for Scrum. The reason for this was because we wanted to build something iteratively and to make sure that we have a working product as per the feedback that we get from the stakeholder and users. Okay. Now here's just more over the design and methodology of the IT artifact. So what you're seeing over here is the actual stuffed animal. So we had several of these. We had this is a genet. We had a caracal. We had what was it? A graysbokkie. We also had an owl, believe it or not. And we would take several images of these stuffed animals. And then this would be the end result after rendering them in Measurum. Now this is a full 3D object, which you can obviously rotate in 360. Over here, what we have is VR mode in the simulation, and then Homedo glasses that you would essentially just snap onto your phone, like your Google Cardboards and so on. And so the user would be able to move around in the environment. And then this would just be one of the points of interest that the users could see. And then a little mini map over here to show them where they are in the nature reserve. The nature reserve, we didn't model from scratch. We actually used Google Maps in 3D mode, took something like 1,000 snapshots from every angle. And then, just give me a second. From every angle, and then we stitched this in Measurum as well using photogrammetry. And then you could traverse your nature reserve by pointing at these spheres over here so that you can actually get more info on certain specimens. And here's just a quick example of what that looked like. So this is what the user would essentially see in their VR simulation after putting on the home video glass. This is being rendered on the PC though. We also took shots of the nature reserve, 360 shots, so you could actually feel like we're more present in the environment. And then by targeting the spheres, as mentioned before, the user could actually then go to certain points in the simulation. So here's the caracal, and they could also switch on audio feedback in the event that they didn't want to read. And the idea here was to give them sort of a full immersive experience. And then what you'll see is this little bee that pops up here, and then that's sort of your avatar, if you will, that tells you all about the caracal in the event that you didn't want to read the text. Okay. So what were some of the limitations of the study or this project? So I come from an academic background. So for me, the data validity or the quantitative, the statistics were quite important. We didn't have an opportunity to validate the usefulness and the experience of the application with a broad population. And this was obviously due to time constraints, which is the second point. We had something like 3 months to complete this project. If you think about having to model out 21 specimens, building out an environment, programming the software, all of these things, I mean, it takes a lot of time, even with just 3 people. And then obviously the engine that we used was quite buggy. It was quite limited. And had we had an opportunity to work in Unity, I think we could have really scaled it up much better and made it look a lot better and polished. Okay. So in terms of conclusions, the requirements were fulfilled, and the client or the nature reserve, the entire nature reserve, were quite happy to actually see their project come to life. I think that's one thing that they took from it. And we basically met all the deliverables in terms of what we were given with our requirements. And then the application provides users with an interactive experience in VR. So it's not to say that you're just standing there and not interacting. The idea is to make the user feel present and experience a state of flow when moving through the application. Okay, and then the project is being further developed by, as I mentioned before, one of the master students, and she's migrating over to a whole new engine and building the entire system from scratch. And that's it from me. Thank you, Mark. Any questions?
Any questions from participants? I have a few, but perhaps you can just pop them in the chat box, and as they come through, we will deal with them. A recent Foresight Africa report indicates that the fourth industrial revolution and digitization will transform Africa into a global powerhouse, and that by 2030, Africa will have, according to this report anyway, the world's largest workforce. So in your opinion, what current and future business challenges is AR and VR education specifically directly addressing?
Okay, so I would say in terms of education, one of the biggest spaces is training and development for sure. And this is because if you think about it, we have a very unusually large population for our geographical location. And the issue with this is if we have to train every single individual, if we have to upskill every single individual, we require the resources to train those individuals. What virtual reality has done is it's allowed us to sort of experience economies of scale when it comes to education, in the sense that you no longer need to have a real airplane, or you don't have to take individuals to a mining facility to train them. You can actually create simulations, and if you build it with high fidelity in mind, you can achieve the same sort of, how can I say, the same sort of knowledge acquisition as you would compared to a real life scenario, just depending on how that fidelity works out. And when I'm talking about fidelity, I'm talking about how the physics in a simulation works. For example, if you take a pencil and you drop it, in the real world, you know it's going to drop. So if you can replicate that physics and the fidelity of a simulation in the real world, knowledge transfer just becomes so much more effective. So I would say training and development is a definite area where we are trying to sort of solve the issues that we currently have in terms of resources and all of those kind of things.
Great, thanks, Ruchen. We have a question from Andre Stein, and it's regarding the VR courses that the University of the Western Cape presents or offers.
Okay, I'm actually glad you asked. So currently we have a course in eSkills, Immersive Technologies. And what we do, just to give you a brief overview for this course, it's a postgraduate degree. Anyone can essentially apply for it. But we do tend to favor the technical background people. But it's not to say that it's a deal breaker, you know. In the program, we've had many people. We've had accountants, we've had people that study business, we had people in the arts, we had so many people in this course. And the idea behind this course is that for a year, for the first 6 months, you are put into training. And in the training, you are introduced to all the software tools, industry standards of developing software, programming, all of these things, 3D modeling, animation, you name it. So that's an intensive 6 months of training. The last 6 months, you are given 2 projects. So you are assigned 2 clients from industry. Last year, we had a client from, I believe it was the Western Cape government in agriculture, where we had a focus on marketing. We had to build a simulation out to sort of market products for a farm. In any case, the idea is that first 6 months training, intensive training, last semester, the next 6 months, you then are assigned clients where you have to work with them and build out software in a project management environment. So that's our sort of big course when it comes to AR and VR. And you'll obviously introduce the new technologies like the Quest, the Vive, and then in terms of AR, we work mostly on the mobile side of things.
Great, thank you. There's a few questions. I think given our time, we've got time for one more, and then I think we'll move on to the next session. There's a question, and it's more technical. Is there presently any way whereby Maya software can be equally used in simulating an AR or VR experience, or is it only possible using 3D Studio Max?
Yeah, so that's actually a good question. From my experience, I've only ever worked with 3ds Max and Blender. The reason for that is because that was the software that I was trained in. So essentially what we would do is just develop our models in 3ds Max and Blender and so on, and then pull them into the engine and then work with them further on. So with Maya specifically, I don't see why there should be an issue in terms of why there should be a limitation in terms of just using 3ds Max. It's not to say that 3ds Max is the only 3D modeling tool out there available to us, you know. There's so much. It's just that when you are building your simulation out, you need to make sure that your objects are compatible with the engine that you are bringing them into.
Okay, great. Excuse me. Thanks, Ruchen. There are further questions. They are being recorded and they will be dealt with directly with the people. So fear not, we have noted your questions. We just have a time constraint as per usual. So thank you for these questions. So AR and VR clearly have a very important role in education and in turn for the 4th industrial revolution. So thank you for that. I'd like to move to the second session and hand over to Mark and Adi from the Boiler Room. Over to you guys.
Thanks, Michael.
Will you give us permission to share screen? If we don't have, we have. Thank you. Here we go. Can you see our PowerPoint? Is the PowerPoint coming through?
We just need the other screen. Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe just change the display settings to swap at the top over there. Display settings, just change it to swap at the top, right?
Otherwise, it's not critical. Is it coming through?
Yeah.
Okay, I must just get it into full screen here, which at the moment it's not wanting to do. Why is it not behaving now? Okay, let's not stress about this. I'm going to stop the share.
Is not just not replicating the screen.
No. So I think, Mark, I think we sort of had a discussion beforehand as to who will pick up the question, and Mark was we were going to have the discussion around the market segments and where do we see augmented reality and virtual reality playing an important role. And I think from a boiler room perspective, we've worked in that, and I don't know if you want to elaborate a little bit about the market segments where we've seen AR and VR really taking off.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a fallacy out there. People think VR and AR is only going to be for movies and entertainment. It's becoming a very, very powerful tool in the training realms. And we're doing a huge amount of work in the mining space, where we've replicated complete mines, coal mines, above ground, underground, platinum mines, diamond mines. We've replicated airports in China, developed maintenance systems using virtual reality. We've got quite a global footprint with some of the mining manufacturers for doing maintenance. We've got petrochemical industry, they're doing amazing things with VR. Telecommunications, that's always been a big one. Education, heavy industry, manufacturing, military is another big one where VR has been used for a number of years. Also aviation, you've probably all seen images of the flight simulators and things. That's sort of generation one of actual virtual reality. That's using old technology. Virtual reality is more sort of using Windows-based systems, tablet-based systems, phone-based VR, right through to your immersive system where you actually put the VR goggle on. The main difference between the two is one teleports you to the actual environment. So we can put people through paces of, we've created digital twins of some of the mining sites where we have the exact replica, and we can show the people how to do the standard operating procedures in virtual reality. So when they're actually exposed to the real world environment, they know what the dangers are, they know what the consequences are. So we actually simulating the workplace, and we're getting phenomenal results from using virtual reality. One of the big things also with virtual reality is the retention rate is through the roof. Normal conventional training, you retain about 25, 30%. With VR, we're pushing that through to 60, 70% retention levels. So it's sort of unheard of.
What about industries like finance, insurance?
Insurance has done some very good things. There's a project in Netherlands where they have a little booth, and you take an AR device and you can see the potential hazards. So you see through the tablet that the stove could ignite. Then you look over there and you see the plug has got too big a load, and over there, and you see all the different areas that could be a potential risk in a home. And apparently the insurance company is saving millions on claims because they're actually proactively teaching the public about some of the household dangers. Finance is also, we've done a little bit of work with the local institutes out here. They're a little bit behind some of the other market players. I think they're slowly waking up to the potential of virtual reality. One of the big things, unfortunately, due to COVID, is companies have had to rethink how they operate. A lot of companies are still working from home. A lot of these companies were thinking about doing e-learning Guess what? Now they're doing e-learning. A lot of companies that were already doing e-learning, okay, what's next? What's next is virtual reality. That's the next step in evolution of training. So it's a really big thing.
And I think, and then this was one of the other questions that were posed to us to see with today's technology and the workflows, people are getting to work faster and smarter in AR. And just to talk a little bit around that, and I'm going to try a second attempt at sharing one of the videos that we've got and see if the video actually plays.
Optimize. Yep.
And let's see if the video actually comes through. Can you see the video there? Hoping it comes through. I think workflows and specifically AR and VR, the tools that are available at the moment have actually empowered us to take this a whole step further. What we are doing, we're making things as realistic as possible. Now, I think what makes it faster and what makes it smarter is the ability for us to actually transfer the knowledge a lot better. And I think Mark was referring to that just now when he said the VR as a delivery mechanism allows us just to get so much more content across the line. It actually allows us to use a whole bunch of sensors that you cannot use when you've got, for example, standard e-learning. With e-learning, I cannot get you to hold the fire extinguisher. With e-learning, I cannot get you to actually press the lever down. Now, those are two, and I'm just using this as an example. Those are two key concepts that you have to get right. When you want to fight a fire, you have to press that button down. You have to pull the pin out. Now, those key concepts in e-learning, you are not going to be doing. In virtual reality, you are actually doing the action, pulling the pin out, pushing the lever down. You can feel the weight of the extinguisher. So what makes this faster and what makes this smarter is that we can replicate the actual real environment a lot better. Okay, it's as close to the real thing that you can get. So we are pushing the boundaries of augmented reality, of virtual reality, to the point where it's as real as it can get. And I think that's where people now all of a sudden realize that through that technology, the retention for one is a lot higher. The adoption then that the person has when they get back into the work environment is also a lot higher. We can assess and we can show consequences. So that's what makes it faster and smarter, is allowing us to simulate and showcase all those individual components that are normally not possible. Okay, and if I say not possible, where can you go and do a lockout like this without interruption to the current operations? How can I take somebody to an oil rig and you experience a storm? What do you do if this happens? Something falls into a machine. We can simulate a breakdown. Things that you cannot do in the real world, we can do in a virtual reality environment. And because of that, it allows people to then work smarter, faster. And I want to add one there that's very, very important. It's not only smarter and faster, but most definitely safer. So for us, when we do this, and we always joke that probably at the boiler room, we've got the most fatalities that anybody has, because we've got a huge amount of fatalities, and it's safe here. If it goes wrong, somebody dies, yes, but it creates a safer working environment. So I want to add that one. With VR, we can work faster, we can work smarter, but we can also work much safer. So with that, I think, yeah, back to you, Mike.
Great, thanks, Adi. I was just thinking about the cost benefits, because typically we read reports, and I suppose to the layperson, AR and VR, I think Mark touched on this earlier, it reduces costs throughout the design and development phases of products, but of course it's expanded into other business areas like sales, marketing, insurance, training, etc. But what are the cost benefits? You've mentioned safety and obviously time, speed to market, and the quality of the actual training and the memory retention. But perhaps you can tell us a bit more about the cost benefits of implementing AR and VR.
A project we did for one of the mines out here, they built a really big new coal mine. We built the whole mine in virtual reality. The company that was charged with building the actual site started using the actual VR goggles and walked through the actual site. They realized quite a few areas where like a pipe was going to go through the infrastructure. So now they realize in the factory, we're going to do a slightly longer pipe before it goes down. So these were things that they found in the VR space that they would have only found once they started assembling the actual unit. So that saved them hundreds, if not thousands, hundreds of thousands of rands in actual production, loss of production. We've also developed a virtual reality maintenance system that we're using for a number of clients globally. One of our clients brought unscheduled maintenance down from 24 hours down to 4 hours. And then we've got a global statistic with it's a mining manufacturer, the largest underground mining equipment manufacturer in the world. Globally, by using our system, they're saving 50% on the maintenance task. So they would take two mechanics, same skill set, right, go off and do the task. You do the refresher training on the tablets, it's tablet-based VR, and if 50% time saving. So that is an astronomical figure.
Also, maybe I can add that from a development point of view, there seems to be the impression out there that as soon as somebody says VR or AR, that the dollar signs are coming up. This is definitely not the case. So it's very much from a VR, AR compared to traditional e-learning. From a cost and a development point of view, you are very much on par, creating something in VR, creating something in traditional e-learning, where, yes, we still do e-learning as well, but I think statistics have proven that VR is a lot more effective. Hope that answers your question.
Well, yeah, sure. And of course, because you're working with, point cloud data and 3D models, and I'm no VR person, but it occurs to me that this is the investment, if I can call it that, is an invest once, use many kind of concept, because now you've got the model and you can rerun all sorts of different maintenance modules, training programs, scenario planning, extensions, upgrading, etc., etc. So it's reusable.
There is a concept, and if you look at that, just for me, just in time, okay? And it's completely relevant because if we build VR, typically what we do an exact replica of the environment. So the person is not exposed to something that they've never seen, that they can't recognize. So it's just for me, just in time, and it's actually based on the real world environment. So I recognize everything that I see in virtual reality, I've seen in the real life, and if I go back, I can actually immediately apply what I've seen. So you immediately make the learner, the user immediately makes that connection to say, oh, I saw this in VR. If I do this, this is what happens. So that connection is automatically there. Where and you know what they say, pictures paint more than 1,000 words.
Yeah.
And I think here that's typically true as well.
Great, thank you. I think I have another question. I think you've answered it, but it's a cool question, so I'm going to ask it anyway, even though it might just be reinforcing what you've already actually said. I read in a VR intelligence report that companies are realizing that by not going the VR route, it's actually costing them a lot of money. And that one of the main reasons for resistance to moving into VR was the lack of use cases and absence of ROI statistics. But I also read there that companies such as Renault, Lockheed Martin, Jaguar Land Rover are now reporting AR and VR ROI metrics. And they touted some figures there of 40% reduction in production costs and savings of up to 4 million euros in 5 weeks, etc., etc. And I think Mark actually touched on that too. But so from a business benefits perspective, perhaps you could just comment further on, the actual ROI benefits of implementing AR and VR?
Yeah, maybe a good, I'll hand over to my studies.
Let's talk about the motion platform.
Yes.
We've developed a motion platform system using virtual reality. So if for example, you want a train simulator to teach a driver how to operate the cab, or a heavy industry, so a big mining haulage truck. Now, some of these mines, we've just done a quote today, the one mine's got 55 different types of vehicles on site. So that's 55 simulators of equipment. Now, each cab might be slightly different. So a conventional simulator is a room with projectors on the side and you actually drive the real cab and the floor moves. Yeah, it's really cool. What we do is we take away all the rooms, we put it into a VR goggle. We have a chair system which has joysticks, or you take the joysticks out, you put a steering wheel down. That is one simulator, and that can do your entire fleet of vehicles, because the cab changes in the goggles, the motions are different per vehicle, and the cost saving is astronomical. A rough price on a basic simulator starting at around about 5-6 million rand per vehicle, as where we can do your entire fleet for a couple of million rand. So it's massive savings.
I think the big corporates, and I think there are some corporates that we can put in here, the likes of VW, the likes of Audi, have all gone and started training their staff with virtual reality on the production line.
Airbus,
yeah.
Airbus
is using that. Taken one step further, the US Army is developing. They're not even going the virtual reality route, they're going mixed reality. So glasses that project the information into your field of view while you can see and while you can still working. So I think organizations are definitely realizing that the future is making this type of learning available. And I think some of these early adopters are definitely seeing the benefits and the return on their investment. So we can definitely see, I mean, we've got I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the continuous miner, which is brought.
Well, that's unscheduled maintenance from 24 hours into 4 hours.
Yeah, 24 hours to 4 hours. I mean, that's a huge amount of time saving.
So typically what that is, it's a very advanced piece of machinery that rips coal off out of the, you're advancing forward, just rips the coal out of where you're traveling. This machine costs around about 50 million rand a piece. And when you're cutting into coal, you have these picks and they just rip the coal off. And inside methane sits pockets of methane gas. If one of those picks happen to hit a spark there, you're going to ignite that methane. It's very volatile gas. So the way you stop that from igniting is you spray a fine mist of water over it. And the water flowing system on this machine, the one client, just 24 hours average time to fix the water flow on this machine. So we built some intensity learning and then an actual VR simulator where we randomly generate the faults. We had the junior mechanics going underground as a small team of 10 people. They would swarm onto, Adi, you take component 1, I'll take component 2, you take component 3, 4, 5. Everybody would, gosh, this panel is really heavy. I didn't realize the weight of this. In VR, you don't know the weight, but behind that panel, I know what to do. The mine is not going to take that piece of 50 million rand kit from underground to let the junior mechanics play on it, but they will let them play on an actual simulated vehicle. And hence we brought from average downtime of 24 hours down to 4 hours. And these juniors are loving it because they get the exposure on the machine that they normally would never get to play with for another 2 to 3 years. So it's been just a win-win for the mine. They're getting production up and running. The junior mechanics are getting experience by playing on the machine that they wouldn't play on for another 3-4 years.
Right.
I think also very interesting, and I think we've spoken a lot about, and I think you've seen some of the examples now, where we've talked very heavily about.
Sorry, these are just a few of hundreds of samples that we've got.
Where we've spoken at length about industry and heavy industry and mining, but I think your cost benefit analysis and your return on investment, is equally on the opposite side. So we spoke a little bit about insurance, we spoke about banks. Globally, we are seeing definitely an uptake there, and the same advantages for those industries as well. If you look at, for example, PwC just published a study where they showcased the use of VR for soft skills training. Now, they get exceptional returns with VR and soft skills training. So I think we're not limited with virtual and augmented reality to industry, heavy industry, mining, and procedures. You can equally apply this to soft skills management. We're working on a management training module at the moment. So you can equally apply that there as well.
Just one thing I'd like to add there, a little bit of marketing. If you guys would like to try some VR, we've got a WebGL channel of our own. It has a whole lot of virtual reality systems in there. It's boilerroom.online.
Perhaps you can pop it in the chat box. It'll be great.
Yeah, we'll actually do that.
Yeah. Okay, keyboards on the other side of the room.
Okay.
We'll reach the keyboard.
Okay, cool. Is there any other questions? I don't see it. I see there's been quite a bit of conversation in the chat box, and they say, the indication of a good webinar is when there's more activity in the chat box than there is on the screen. So that's perfect. So look, clearly, words that we hear today, or we've heard them for a while, but we hear them more and more with COVID, as regards, businesses and successful business operation, words like efficiency, words like effectiveness, agility, cost saving, profitability, productivity, and 112 other adjectives and a bit of jargon that people will throw in. Clearly, AR and VR, I was going to say, is going to be part of, companies being just that. The quicker they can turn around things, train people, simulate things, repair things, build things, develop things, design things, and the safer they can do it, obviously, the better and the more cost effective it is. So that is awesome. I just want to ask Stacey, anything more from your side at this stage?
Hi there.
So I'm going to,
you can also look at another case study, a company called Ludus VR. They're an international company in Spain. They use pretty much all the Autodesk, AutoCAD, Maya. They use 3ds Max. They use Navisworks. They use the whole collection of software as well. So one of their case studies can be seen. I'll send it to you after the webinar, and you can actually read up on that and how they're using all of that Autodesk software in their case studies. It's an international one as well. So take a look at that when we're done. Ludus VR.
great.
Can I just throw one of the questions was, can Maya be used? Pretty much, you got two sides to the development of virtual reality. You've got the design stage, the animation, the lighting, texturing. That's where Autodesk is one of the powerhouse tools. Anything Autodesk is going to be one of the primary tools you want to learn. The other side of the coin is the programming side. That is not Autodesk at the moment, but that's the two development sides. You've got the front end and the back end. Front end, 100%, anything Autodesk will be a great choice.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. We are 4 minutes over, which is not bad, considering the ground we covered. No. If there are no other questions, I'd like to wrap up. Is that you good with that, Stacey?
I'm good, thank you.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us, firstly, and University of the Western Cape, Boiler Room, all the mugshots on the screen.